Okay, and we are live.
And I'm not sitting yet.
No
Hello.
worries.
I'm gonna get some water.
Hello.
Hello,
So,
hello.
welcome everybody to episode number 11 of the Toon Room podcast. This is a conversation I've been dying to have for almost a year now, since I first saw a demo at NSC last summer. Very impromptu demo. I think it was like an Autodesk party or something.
Mm.
And today our guest is Coco Nitta. He's the founder of Kamik.ai. Is that the
It's
correct
Kamik.ai. Unless you're in Japan, then it's Kamikai, which is actually a Japanese word. So
Kamikai?
depends on what
Okay,
language you're
okay,
coming at from. Yeah.
okay. And we'll talk a little bit more about what the start of the company does and is trying to do a little bit later. I think it's really interesting, and in my mind, I'm gonna just spoiler alert, come straight out with my conclusion of this. I think it's a really wonderful example of what the new technology can, maybe should, I'm not the one to judge, be in the future in terms of availing of the possibilities, but at the same time maintaining some creative control, or most creative control rather. As you know, we've had our little pre-chat before. I'm really interested in personal stories, and a little bit of background and how you kind of got to where you are. All my conversations I've had so far are really fascinating in that sense. There's hardly anybody who, when they were young, went, like, "Oh my God, I really want to be working in animation," and like very rare. People
Mm.
are either really passionate about it and love it, and they want to go into art or some other visual medium or something completely different, like writing or journalism or whatever, and or business, and somehow they end up through a series of events and pivots where they are. So yeah, so I'm just really curious to know a little bit of your background. Your station based in Tokyo. Obviously, um, I would probably, it would not be far fetched to say that anime is a huge thing in your life. So I'm, just tell us a little bit about your background, and how you got into the business of animation in general.
Yeah, happy to share. And thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of the podcast. So I appreciate that.
Thank you for being here.
My story is an interesting one. I don't know how much detail we want to get into here, but
As much as you're comfortable with.
okay. Yeah. Well, I'm 42. Well, I will be in 2 weeks. I'll be 42. Um,
Congrats.
I was born in a cult in the middle of Death Valley, in a mobile home
Okay.
on the road, very secluded and uh, kind of separated from a lot of the outside world. I wasn't, exposed to a lot of pop culture, secular music, and that sort of thing, secular world growing up. Um, but I was very drawn to music. Music kind of was my savior when I was
Mm,
growing up. Music is just in my family. It's in my blood. I grew up with a musical mother. She plays harp. My dad builds harps. I grew up
nice.
around Celtic
Wow.
folk music. And I also had I won't go into the kind of traumatic parts of what it's like growing up inside of a cult. I'll just leave that up to your
Sure.
imagination.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
but we could do a whole nother podcast about that. But
Yeah.
the reason this part is relevant to the story is that there was another very safe place for me when I was growing up, and it was watching Disney movies. It was watching classic Disney
Right.
animation. I grew up really obsessed with Disney and learning everything I could about not just the films, but how they were made and the technology behind them. Um, but I never felt compelled to like work in animation or learn how to animate or be an animator. It was just like a kind of nerdy passion and appreciation
Hmm.
for the medium of storytelling. And I actually have a tattoo of Walt Disney's face on my
Oh
whole arm.
wow.
You can see the little.
Yeah, I remember this. Yeah.
So, anyways, it's animation has was seeded in my DNA and who I am from a very young age, but so was music. The two things I guess were competing in my young mind, and I was born with musical talent, and so I was able to get myself out of the kind of weird situation that was my childhood and out of this small little desert town that I grew up in, and made my way to Los Angeles, and where all the opportunity is, I guess, and all where the music industry was. And I got very lucky at a very young age. I got in. I met kind of the right people that really they saw something in me, and I got some mentors that were pretty well established,
Nice.
well known people in the music industry that brought me in and mentored me. And so long story short, I became pretty successful in the music industry at a pretty young age as a music producer and a songwriter and culture maker. I was there at the beginning of the dawn of the EDM movement, as it is called in America. That
Oh
is not the birth of
yeah.
dance music, but the reignition of dance music around 2005, 2006. Um, I was a ghost producer for some big name uh, DJs. I
Mm,
helped I helped teach some very big name electronic music artists. Like I gave them their start. Like was a big part of the electronic dance movement in the early 2000s in Los Angeles around those folks.
wow.
And I did the artist thing for a little bit and decided I hated touring, but I did get to play like EDC several times and a lot of big festivals. I did the tour circuit for a little bit as an electronic music artist quite early on, like in the early 2000s to late
Yeah.
2000s. Decided I hated touring, and then decided what I actually prefer to be doing is be in the studio, learning how to like push the boundaries as a music producer and a songwriter. And so I ended up becoming full time just doing that. And through that, I ended up collecting a couple Grammy nominations. I've won 2 American Music Awards. I wrote and produced a lot of songs and worked with
Nice.
some very big pop artists, some big name pop artists, and got into film composition and film scoring, that sort of thing. Built a music publishing company and music production company, and did that pretty much my entire adult life. And thought I would always do music. Honestly, I didn't think I would ever do anything but music, and didn't really have a reason not, to change into some new industry or new life
Yeah.
path. Um, it Yeah, I got comfortable, I got successful. When I was younger, I was obsessed with music and music technology and learning, like, sound design and electronic music specifically because every day there would be, like, a new plugin, and I wanted to go beta
Right.
test,
Yeah.
and I was part of the beta testing team for Ableton Live, and I wanna like, literally from version 1, I started using Ableton Live before, like, anyone else, and I was, like, helping the development of it. So I had some exposure to technology on that side, but it's creative technology as a user, but really wanting to understand how to push the boundaries of creative technology. Um, and yeah, but never thought in a million years I would become the founder of a tech startup making animation software in Japan. Quite, yeah. I still kind of have to take a moment to think, how did I get here? It's kind of strange. But
Yeah.
I can trace it to a particular moment in time. Um, I used to be a bit of a doomer about the future of society and the planet. When I was in my 20s, I would do the math, and every time I would do the math, I just couldn't see any outcome where we don't end up in a very bad situation with a significant portion of the population dying. I was very concerned about global warming and
Yeah.
geopolitics and
Environmentally. Yeah. Okay. 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 Yeah.
yeah, geopolitics and environmental, and seeing the state of where the trajectory of where the human race seemed to be going. It was difficult for me to feel
Yeah.
optimistic about it, and I was a bit of a
Yeah.
doomer. And then I went to see a talk. I saw Ray Kurzweil give a talk at UCLA. I think this might have been like, I don't know how many years, 13, 14 years ago, um, something like that, and it changed my life. Ray Kurzweil, if you don't know who he is, like look him up. He's written some great books, and he's been one of those people that has been able to accurately predict the future for his entire career, for decades. In fact, he was an advisor to Bill Clinton during his administration,
Okay.
because he was able to predict what was accurately predict what was going to happen in the future. And he wrote a book called The Singularity, and many years ago,
Hmm.
talking about how basically talking about what's happening now. He predicted that, and on a pretty accurate timeline, he predicted what was going to happen with AI and how AI would reshape the world and become the next industrial revolution and completely
Yeah.
free society. And he painted it he has always painted it in a very optimistic light. Of course, he talks about the dangers and the potential risks, but he 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 presented a version of the future to me that felt, for the first time, felt like hope. It felt like, okay, there is a potential way out of this. And so
Yeah.
at that point, I became very fascinated with AI as a concept, and what it could potentially mean for for society. Prior to that, it was just a sci-fi concept in movies, which I also have
Yeah.
always been a huge fan of sci-fi and these kind of concepts. And also, I really like exploring the ideas of how it can all go wrong as well. The Black Mirror versions of it and the Terminator
Right.
version of it. But
Yeah.
more importantly, practically speaking, I've always really been fascinated with all the ways it can go right. And but it's always just been as I guess like a hobbyist and just a nerdy fascination, and listening to podcasts, reading books, going to see people speak about it, but never thinking of it as a potential career option or something that I could actively participate in until I saw diffusion technology. When I saw diffusion technology for the very first time, it changed my life. It was so when I first discovered Ableton Live, it changed my life, and I became like so obsessed that I spent 14 to 16 hours every day just trying to learn how. Because prior to that, it was very difficult to record really nice music at home, like professional grade music. And this was a
Hmm.
technology that was invented that all of a sudden on a laptop, I could make all the sounds inside of my head happen, for very little
Yeah.
cost. And I became obsessed with that. I was like, wow, like this is a superpower. And I spent, years and years of my life mastering that. And I didn't think I'd ever find that level of fascination with anything ever again in my life. And then when I saw diffusion technology, it all happened all over again, and I kind of went manic a little bit, and a lot of my friends were, like, worried about me. I was like, "This it's happening, and we're here, it's coming," and I was the guy, like, 5, 6 years ago at the party always that was drunk, just being like, "AI is gonna do this, and AI is gonna do that," and everyone's like, "Okay, whatever," and now I'm the guy, like, in the last couple of years, I'm the guy like, "I told you so," like, we're finally at that point. Anyways, so why was it so life changing for me, and why did it get me so excited? Diffusion technology specifically. It wasn't LLMs that got me so excited. It was diffusion technology because I saw the
Could you
future.
yeah, just real quick, could you break it down for us? What does that mean?
Diffusion technology, sure. Diffusion technology is the generative. It's a type of model or an infrastructure or architecture of model. It's a model classification.
Hmm.
It's the technology that has brought us generative images and generative video. And it was this kind of starting point version of that. So things like Midjourney, for instance, where all of a
Right.
sudden you type in a text prompt, you want to see something, and it will generate that as an image for you. And now we see there's much more sophisticated versions of that today. It's generating whole videos and movies with sound. And anyways, like the early versions of this, when I first saw this,
Okay.
like 4 years ago or 5 years ago, maybe, I, I saw it instantly as this is going to completely change filmmaking, animation, storytelling, games. everything. Visual storytelling, this is going to completely change everything, and it's going to happen fast. Um, there's a documentary that I watched. It's a docu-series, actually. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. It's called Light and Magic. It's on Disney Plus. It's a docu-series
Hmm.
that kind of walks through the whole story of how Industrial Light and Magic started, which is the very first independent VFX house ever to exist,
Yeah,
which George
yeah,
Lucas started. He started Industrial Light and Magic. He started it specifically so that he could make Star Wars, because he got the green
yes,
light for Star Wars, but he actually had no idea how he was actually going to make Star Wars, because the technology at the time did not exist to make Star Wars. So he spent a lot of his personal money to spin up Industrial Light and Magic, which was just a bunch of guys that he had collected from around the world, innovators that were pushing the boundaries of technology and film tech. He put them in a warehouse for a year and said, "This is what I want to get done for Star Wars. Figure out how to do it." And they built all the technology to make. They innovated the technology that made it possible to make Star Wars.
yeah.
And then they became the gold standard of visual effects for many, many years. But in this documentary, a lot of people don't realize this unless you watch the documentary, but Pixar actually came from Industrial Light and Magic. And so did Adobe, so did Photoshop. It
Mm,
all came from Industrial Light and Magic. It was the cradle of innovation for a very long period of time. And there's a particular this documentary. The reason I bring it up is I started my company because of this documentary, in large part because it was what helped
okay.
me really see the pattern. So there's an interview in this documentary with Steven Spielberg, and he's talking about how
Hmm.
uh, when he decided to when he got the green light to make Jurassic Park, and as he had done many times in the past, he went to Industrial Light and Magic to make to do the VFX for Jurassic Park. But
Yeah.
prior to this point in time, Industrial Light and Magic was only a practical VFX shop, so they weren't doing any sort of CGI. They, in fact, only had two computers on the premise, so they were building out his dinosaurs, and they were building them as animatronics and puppets, and they were going to do Jurassic Park with practical effects, as they had always done all of Steven Spielberg's films, practical effects. So models and um,
Yeah. Yeah.
motion and animatronics. Uh, there were two guys at working at Industrial Light and Magic that were playing around with 3D modeling in the back, as just messing around R&D. And they thought, why don't we try and model a dinosaur and see if we can make a dinosaur look photoreal? No one's ever done that. No one's ever modeled anything that looks photoreal. 3D modeling was so, 3D textures, all of that stuff was very new technology. And in parallel, they'd spent millions building these mechanical dinosaurs for Steven Spielberg to do that. And then
Yeah.
Steven Spielberg was like, "These look great. This is awesome." And these two guys in the back, they spent months and months and months making one single animation of a Tyrannosaurus Rex, but they made it look photoreal, and they didn't tell anyone about it. They showed it to George Lucas and the rest of the team there, and they were just like, "What the fuck? This is crazy." Uh, and then they invited Steven Spielberg in to look at it, and they'd had a whole screening, and they put it up on the screen, and they played it for him. There's actually a lot of kind of royalty in the room at the time, or people that go on to become royalty in Hollywood. And Steven Spielberg, in his interview, describes this moment when he saw the dinosaur as the closest thing to a spiritual experience he's ever had in his entire life. Because when he saw the dinosaur, he
Yeah.
knew he knew that everything was going to change. He knew that this was the moment that the entire way that we make films was going to change forever. And he was right. He saw the future in the early versions of the technology. He knew that it was the beginning of CGI and special effects, and the rest is history, right? And so for me,
Yeah.
when I saw Diffusion, it was a similar kind of experience. I understand maybe how Steven Spielberg felt when he saw those dinosaurs. I thought, holy shit, this is going to be that
Nice.
next
Yeah.
wave, but on a scale that's unimaginable, because it's not just about power, it's about democratization. It's about how, and that's what got me excited. I wasn't like, when I saw the tech, I wasn't, let's go start a tech company. I was like, what can I do with this technology as a creative? What projects does this unlock for me? How can I make music videos, and how can I make my own anime, and how can I like make these worlds come alive that are inside of my head? Because I've always had these worlds in my head. I just didn't have access to Hollywood budgets. I didn't have access to. I didn't know how to draw very well. I didn't know how to film. There was just so many things I didn't have, but I had the ideas.
Yep.
I had the ideas in my mind, and this allowed me to access those things so much easier and faster. So that's really the story, I guess, of how I all of a sudden decided to jump into AI. It
Yeah.
wasn't really all of a sudden. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. That all tracks, and I can relate to the excitement, and I can relate to the feeling of I don't know, powerlessness, I suppose, when you're lacking certain skills.
Mm,
So, for example, me as a director, and I've been working in animation for many, 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 many years, but I'm not an animator. I'm not an illustrator. I can't draw. So, and I keep telling this to everybody who has this practical skill. They can draw beautifully, they can illustrate, they can come up with characters, they can animate and so on. It's like I'm trying to explain to them how much of a superpower this is, because
mm,
this is something you can take with you everywhere.
mm,
So for me, and at least at the present status quo, things are changing, obviously,
mm,
but and already have to a certain degree. But for me, like I need a team, right? I need a group of people to support me with their skills, and then it's like you were explaining, like I have all these ideas in my head. Can somebody please help me get them out of there and
mm,
manifest them in this physical universe?
mm,
So I can totally relate to that, where there's so many things that maybe you would like to do, but it's hard to iterate on them, even if it's just as a creative exercise, right? Even if it's just to kind of test or see or look at it and detach from it, like, and it's there, something is there, and then you can step back and look at it and kind of go, is this anything or not really,
yeah,
right? So I
yeah,
get that frustration of kind of being backed up and
yeah,
trying to figure out avenues to get it out and to make things. So I
yeah.
can totally relate to that.
I was Yeah, as I was sharing earlier about my story when I discovered Ableton Live and how the digital workstation changed my life. It had a democratizing effect on the music industry and the process of creating
Sure.
music.
Yeah.
Uh, it was kind of compounded by the information age blossoming as well with the invention of social media. So, like, all at once, and like, prior to all this happening, there was one pathway to becoming a successful musician. You had to record a shitty demo on a cassette tape, and then you had to
Yeah.
figure out a way for some executive somewhere to pass it to somebody, would hear that cassette demo that's like proof of talent, and then they would hand you $1 million, and then you would take that $1 million, and then all of a sudden they say, well, you have to give half of this to a recording studio to record your album because it's very expensive to record the music, and then you have to give the
Yes.
other half of it, like, it's actually just an advance, and you're giving it right back to us because the other half of it, it's going to go to marketing so we can make sure that your music gets heard and we get it placed on radio
Yeah.
because they own distribution as well. And you're like, okay, great. And so you had all these gatekeepers that you had to rely on, and so much of it was based on opportunity and privilege and luck and fate. And
Yeah.
meanwhile, the vast majority of very talented musicians would go undiscovered, and then all of a sudden, very quickly, anybody in any part of the world, there was a feasible access point for them to record high quality music of any genre, of any kind, any idea in their head, with no gatekeepers or any executive creative directors or studios telling them what they should record and what's a good idea and what's a bad idea. They could just make it, record it, and then they could distribute it themselves for free and market it themselves for free. And it completely changed everything. And it changed my life. I lived that. I lived
Mm.
that change uh, personally. I watched it happen as a result of technology. And
Yeah.
same thing is now unfolding with visual storytelling because of AI. The barrier of entry is going low. It's becoming lower and lower and lower. And of course, a lot of people are saying, well, what about the slop? And it's like, yes, slop has always been a problem. And when the digital workstation, when Ableton Live was invented and social media was invented, that certainly dramatically increased the amount of slop that gets pushed out into the world. So we get
Yeah,
oversaturation of content, but still we found a way for cream to rise to the top. And overall, it ended up becoming a better music industry, and music as an art form is better for it. So
yeah,
now we're experiencing what it looks like to have a bunch of visual slop to have to
yeah,
navigate through, and that's the downside of all this. But
yeah.
the cream will rise to the top, and the cream is dictated by the human point of view, whether the idea was good or the idea was bad.
Yeah, and I think that's I can think of two very specific examples from my early career where you would have a piece of new tech really democratize things, and it's the same. There's always a lot of stuff people rush into it, and there's always like my feeling at the time was like these people shouldn't like there should be some licensing or something. They should be, they should be tested first
Yeah.
if they can handle the technology. But the first is digital cameras, right?
Mm,
So when I started working, I got my start in live action and still love it to bits, and it's just a different medium. And back then, this is early 2000s, very early 2000s, but even back then, if you wanted premium production, you would shoot on film.
mm,
So my mentors and my the older dudes, directors who were doing high end productions for advertising or music videos or whatever it was, film, like narrative movie making, I mean, they
mm.
would shoot on celluloid, on film, and
Right.
it's obviously it's a beautiful process. And I shoot on film. I have a little collection of 35 mil cameras, so it's a thing in and of itself. But once digital cameras started coming in, there's so much more content now that people can make, and it democratized it,
It did.
obviously. And there's a lot of people making a lot of bad stuff
Yeah.
because the whatever the RE camera equivalent was costs, I don't know, north of 100K, plus the lenses, plus the film processing costs, whatever, cheaper to rent,
Mm,
fine. And a Sony XL1 was like 7K or something.
mm.
I don't know. I'm just
Not
just
good. The barrier of entry lowered,
yeah,
access.
yeah, just kind of guessing the numbers. And the second thing was YouTube. You
Mm.
know, it's
Yeah.
like, oh, fun, this is interesting,
Efficient.
and people posting very crappy whatever it is cat videos. And I think probably this is one of the reasons why things like Vimeo came about. It's like, oh no, we're gonna have a very specific thing for professionals and to share their work and so on. There's all this slop. It wasn't the term. I think the term was
Yeah.
crap back then. There's always
Yeah.
crap on YouTube, and so on. And we're gonna hear this is for professionals and for creators, which fine. It makes sense. But eventually, people who do want to make quality storytelling, let's say, because in my mind everything is music, whatever. They do want to put quality things together. They do rise to the top, in a
Yeah.
sense. I did want to ask you one thing. Just
Yeah.
let's a little bit of a segue, but you were speaking about the music industry, and I was looking into it a little bit, in the past like couple of years. And in terms of the distribution, like, what's your thoughts on that for an independent artist who is trying to, you know, publish their own music on whatever it is, Spotify and all the other platforms? There's always, you know, big conversation about it being unfair and that the platforms take a huge chunk, and it's just that it's shifted from basically recording companies and labels, taking the lion's share of the revenue, and now it's just Spotify does the same thing. So maybe I'm not privy to certain details or how the mechanism works under the hood, but what will your thoughts be on that?
Well, I mean, there's been a lot of news in recent years, a revolt against, artists revolt against Spotify, and because the deal that Spotify has with with the people that are providing content and publishing content there has changed over the years and become more and more
Hmm.
advantageous for the streaming platforms and less advantageous for the artists and the creators. um, that is that is like the double-edged sword of technology. Is Yes, everyone got new levels of accessibility and everything became democratized, and music as an art form became way more eclectic, and all of a
Yeah,
sudden you've got, you know, some kid in Kenya that puts the song up online and it influences some dubstep producer in his bedroom in Seattle, and then they invent a new
which is
genre of
awesome,
music
right?
overnight, and that's
Yeah,
amazing. That's amazing.
yeah,
However, uh, what success in the music industry looked like prior to the digital era was very different than what success in the music industry looks like today. So there was the trade-off that
hmm,
happened, and it's not just because like tech companies became greedy. Like there was no arguing that it is a better way to distribute and consume music if all the music in the whole world can exist on your phone and can be streamable
yeah,
for a subscription. That's a better consumer experience. It's more convenient, and there's upside for the artists as well. However, there's just not nearly as much money being made as when they were printing physical CDs, and when
yeah,
they're printing records and they're printing cassette tapes and, you know, 8 tracks. The the business model had to change because the technology became better and it became better user experience for the consumer. But there was a downside to that. So a lot of money got sucked out of the music industry. It just wasn't there anymore. So everything moved towards touring and merchandising, and people had to get more inventive in
yeah,
creating new revenue streams. So from a distribution standpoint, and of course, there has been corporate greed for sure. There definitely just has been corporate greed and big tech
right,
coming
yeah,
into the music industry, and that always is a factor. And that's the downside of all of this. And it's a conversation worth having. Like we're seeing it happen. Like everything's getting disrupted in the same way in Hollywood now, and you know, Netflix came in, big tech company, and completely changed everything about the film industry. And AI is certainly creating new different types of disruption in the same way. I think that people like I think I have a very Ray Kurzweil kind of take on this whole thing. To take it
right,
all the way back to
yeah,
Ray Kurzweil, I think we're having the wrong conversations. Like, sure, let's figure out how to navigate all this stuff in the midterm, but where this all takes us really is, in my opinion, unless it all goes terribly wrong, we have a real opportunity to completely reinvent capitalism as we've known it. And I think
mm,
that that's very real. Like we're talking about, oh, like think about the artist jobs and this and that. It's like think about everyone's jobs. Like honestly, like doctors aren't safe, lawyers aren't safe. Like we've never had an industrial evolution that's happened in the history of humanity was that was going after white collar jobs, and all of them all at once.
yeah,
Uh, Technology comes, and this has always happened historically. Technology replaces jobs or changes jobs, but typically it changes human labor, blue collar jobs. We've never had a
mhm,
technology that comes in and threatens like all of the white collar jobs all at once, and creative jobs. And this is happening now, and it's about to get really weird. And I'm certain that the transition will be very weird, and there are certainly ways that this could all go terribly wrong. But what we should be talking about is how this could all go very right, and trying collectively as a society to ensure that it goes there. But in my mind, if it does go there and we do get there, um, we won't be talking about we won't be framing any industries through the lens of capitalism as the way that we have for decades and decades and decades. We'll be
yeah,
living in a post-capitalistic society where work is optional. You work if you want to work. You do the thing that you want. You wake up in the morning and you do the thing that you want to do most because you want to, and you don't have to do the thing that is just the thing that gets you paid. And as you know, as artists, even myself, like I was successful as an artist. I was successful in the music industry. And there's plenty of things that I got to create as an artist that I'm very proud of. But also to get to that point in my career, there was a lot of artistic compromises I had to make. There was a lot of things that I didn't care that much about, but they paid me, and there was a lot of decisions
Yeah.
that I got forced to make because the record label told me this is what they needed it to sound like. But I did it, and I still found some
Yeah.
fulfillment in it. But really, if I was able to wake up in the morning and make the exact thing I wanted to make, it definitely probably wouldn't be the thing that would have paid me the most or pay me anything at all. And so, anyways, I guess the point I'm trying to get at here is like
Yeah.
we can sit here and talk about like how we need new distribution models and this and that, but I think that capitalism is going to implode. I think that AI forces capitalism to eat itself. It forces us to UBI. It's like inevitable. I personally think that it's either that or like something really bad.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Well,
but
let's try and focus on the positive.
yes, yes,
Yeah, I think just the idea of doing what you love generally is a good approach to life in general. But it's tough. It's hard because you have to, the reality of life, right? You have to pay
people
the
don't
rent
have that
and
luxury. Yeah,
take care of the kids, and it's a luxury. And yeah. So okay, so how did this transition then from essentially audio to a visual medium happen in your head? How did you get hooked
yeah.
on, okay, we need to we
Okay.
need to start we need to start working on some pictures here.
There's more to my personal story that's relevant, I guess. So,
Okay.
I and relevant to what we were talking about. So, me and my two best friends, who are also very successful in the music industry, they were stuck in a bad record deal at Interscope, and they were two of the most genius music creators and artists that I've ever met in my life. We became very close friends, and they had a couple really big hit records, and then the record label was like they decided who they should be, and they were like, that's not who we are, and they were making all this amazing music, and then the record label was saying, no, we're shelving this, like you are the next chain smokers. I'm like, we're not the chain smokers. And anyways, so I helped
Yeah.
them get out of their deal, and I was like, we had all had it up to here with the music industry and with Spotify and all the, like, basically what we were just talking about, how fucked it is for
Yeah.
artists. And
Yep.
and we've also thought how fucked it is that we've sold millions of records, and we have billions of streams collectively, but yet we've made more money from Web3 than we have from music. Something's wrong here, right? And so we decided to start a project called Roki. It was an anonymous music project where the three of us, kind of like the gorillas, the gorilla, what
Mm,
let's create virtual avatars that represent us, and we're going to release music under this anonymously, and no one will know it, it's us, and it's going to be these characters, these fictional characters that we created for ourselves. And we're going to release it exclusively on Web3. We're not going to put it on the DSPs, the digital streaming platforms won't touch it. We're not even going to touch like social media. We're just going to do it through Web3, and we're going to try and prove this out as a model where we can get enough fans. It doesn't have to be millions of fans, just enough fans that like the exact music
yeah.
that we want to make. We wanted to make 7 to 10 minute songs. We wanted a song to have a 3 minute intro before the lyrics even start, and we didn't want to have to worry about the algorithms deprioritizing our
Yes.
music, because that was the
Yeah.
creative decisions we wanted to make. So Web3 doesn't care. We set it out on Web3, and we found enough of a fan base that was willing to, we could monetize our music
Yeah.
through Web3, and it worked. And then we sat there and thought, well, shit, like we can't. We want to make music videos, and we have these characters, and the gorillas made music videos. They had to hire animators to do that. We're like, I guess we have to learn how to do animation. So
Mhm.
we taught ourselves Unreal Engine, and we taught ourselves how to make music videos. Um, and also, it's worth mentioning my two best friends, they're also super obsessed with the concept of AI way before AI was cool. And
Yeah.
like, that was one of the things we bonded on. So when we saw this dawn of AI technology happen, we are also working on this project where we had made a couple music videos that it took us several months to make a music video. Well, it only took us
Yep.
like maybe 4 or 5 days to make the song. And we're like, this model doesn't work.
There's a dissonance there. Yeah.
We need visual content, and we don't want to hire a huge team. We don't have the money to go hire an animation studio or the time. Like, this doesn't match up. What if AI could help solve this problem for us? So we started making AI music videos, and we taught ourselves how to use some of the very early before and this is before there was consumer facing like Runway and like ways where you could make video using AI. We were deep in the open source tech, figuring out how to train our own models so that we could make music videos.
Oh,
We went
wow.
super nerdy into it, and we were connecting with other people we found online that were also creatives that were really pushing the boundaries of what was possible with the open source tech, fine tuning existing large models that were white papered and open source, fine tuning them to on our style. And then we decided to take it a level further and like, well, what if our characters had a backstory? Because we have always been obsessed with anime and animation. We're like, let's
Hmm.
make our own anime. So this will kind of be like, it'll be like the musical, like we'll have music videos and then we'll have our fictional characters and they're going to have their own story and universe and lore.
Yeah.
We start going deep into that, and AI made it
Gotta have it.
possible
Yeah.
for us to explore that. So what was unintended was when we put these videos online, we were so early, people started being like, "What the fuck? Like your music's great, but how are you doing these visuals? Like, what is this?" No one had seen AI videos, some of the very first AI video in the world to ever happen, and we weren't thinking anything of it in that way. We were just like trying to get our stories out there, and we saw it as just another medium to do it in. Um, but we started getting hit up by people like Marvel and Amazon and Will.i.am and Britney Spears. They're like, "You want to make a music video for us?" I'm like, "Whoa." Um, Jennifer Lopez and
Yeah.
Amazon hit us up like, "Do you want to work are you a production studio?" We're like, "Well, not really." So I saw an opportunity and I decided, okay, let's start a new business. So the name of that music project, the Web3 anonymous music project, which clearly isn't anonymous now because I'm telling you I'm associated with it, but
Yeah.
it was called Roki. And if you spell Roki backwards, it spells Icor, which is the name of my company, Icor Labs, because it
Yeah.
was the genesis of my company. And when we first started it, we were Icor Studios. So we did for maybe 8 months, we did several creative projects using AI. We built the pipelines, built the tech for it, and we did the very first opening title sequence to a feature film using AI for Jennifer Lopez. We did the very first, worked on this opening title sequence for a TV show for Marvel. We made the AI pop music video with Britney Spears and Will.i.am. And it was during that time
Wow.
that I saw, wow, like there's going to be a huge commercial demand for this technology. And I looked around the landscape and I saw there was starting to be some of the early players like Midjourney and Runway ML, and they were all focused towards building these kind of general purpose kind of consumer platforms so that anybody could just show up and make a video. And they're focused on maybe a little bit prosumer, but mostly just general consumer. And I thought, who's going to
Yeah.
be the Adobe here? It's certainly not Adobe because they're a legacy company and they're moving so slow in AI. Like, there's going to be
Hmm.
someone needs to come in here and build the professional tools so studios can actually use AI in a meaningful way. And it needs to be built by people that really understand the traditional production pipelines. And so that's
Yeah.
when I decided to pivot the company into creating software, creating professional tools. And the reason we went for animation specifically first was
Hmm.
I have Walt Disney tattooed on my arm. I love
Yeah.
anime. The reason I love anime and fell in love with anime is because Japan kept the tradition of traditional hand drawn frame by frame animation alive, while the West abandoned it decades ago. Disney stopped doing it. Everyone stopped doing it. All the 2D animation that was being produced in the West was parts and pieces on Toon Boom Harmony. It was rigged puppets. They stopped hand drawing one frame at a time, and it lost the warmth
Hmm.
and it lost the beautiful energy that is traditional hand drawn animation that I fell in love with all the things I fell in love with early on, like Peter Pan and Jungle
Yeah.
Book and
Yeah.
Disney, and then I discovered Studio Ghibli when I was really young. I was like, this is the new like he's Hayao Miyazaki is the new Disney. He's the Disney now of our
Hmm.
generation. And I became obsessed, and I deeply respected that Japan said, no, we're not going to move towards this new pipeline just because it's faster and cheaper. It doesn't have the same feel. It's not the same thing. We're going to keep this hand drawn thing alive, even though it's really slow and labor intensive and expensive. And
Yeah.
it takes forever to do. We would respect the craft. And I love that. And so I thought as this technology evolves, it certainly will become. I thought back back when I first was thinking, where do we aim our tech first? Like, do we build tools
Hmm.
for consumers? Do we build tools for live action VFX? Do we build tools for 3D animation? Do we build tools for 2D? And if it's 2D, who is it for? The reason my thought process was, this technology is going to evolve on some timeline. I think it's going to become commercially viable for 2D animation before it becomes commercially viable for 3D animation, and before, certainly before it becomes commercially viable for VFX for live action, or a placement for live action.
Hmm.
And so I thought, okay, 2D animation is the perfect place to start. Plus, I love 2D animation. I'm a huge fan of 2D animation. Plus, Japan, I knew during that time, was really struggling because before COVID, 2D anime was still a niche, nerdy thing outside of Japan, or especially in the
Yeah.
West. You could only really get it on Crunchyroll.
Yeah.
There hadn't been big distribution deals done where all of a sudden, like all the major streaming platforms like Amazon and Apple and Netflix, they didn't have really much anime at all. It was all through Crunchyroll. Distribution things changed. Crunchyroll got bought by Sony, and then all of a sudden, the whole world got flooded with anime during COVID, when everyone had nothing to do except binge watch everything. And once they finished watching everything there was to watch on
Hmm.
Netflix, they're like, "Well, I wonder what Attack on Titan's about." And a whole generation of people outside of Japan got exposed to anime for the first time ever, and they fell in love with it. And in a short period of time, a matter of years, anime went from being niche and nerdy to full on global zeitgeist of pop culture. Everybody wants anime. Drake loves anime. It is now the coolest thing ever. And
Hmm.
Japan was like, wow, this is amazing. But also, how do we keep up with this demand all of a sudden, this huge global demand? They have this small studio ecosystem that they're the keepers of the secrets of how to produce Japanese anime. Meanwhile, the global appetite for anime has just skyrocketed. And all of the production, uh, the timelines for all the studios, large and small, in Japan went from 1 year backlogs to 4 year backlogs. Like, everybody's slates were
Yeah.
booked 4 years. And then you still had more. You had people in the West coming to Japan with large pocketbooks and large IPs and saying, "One anime, please." And Japan is saying, "We don't have time, get in line. And we would much rather do our adaptations of manga first before we even start to consider your Western IP." And so I saw bottlenecks, and I also saw labor shortages, and I saw animators dropping out of the field because they were getting overworked and underpaid, and
So
there weren't
burnt
union.
out. Yeah.
They're getting burnt out. There's no unions. There's no protections for them. I saw that the vast majority of the studios in Japan, it's a very low margin game for them. Like, they're barely making any money. The IP holders are making all the money. Meanwhile,
Right.
the heart and soul of the industry, they're barely getting by because they don't own the IP. I saw all these different problems in the industry, and I saw potentially the industry imploding and that anime goes away. And I was like, that's scary because I love anime and I don't want it to go away. And it just didn't, the current model did not seem sustainable. And so I went to Japan in the end of 2023 and met with MAPPA and a bunch of big studios and started learning more deeply about the industry. And I saw, okay, yeah, it actually is like, it's going into the red zone. Like, things are getting bad here. Like, not only are animators quitting, but young people coming out of school, they're no longer choosing to be an animator. They're choosing, they don't want to do hand drawn animation. They don't see it
Yeah.
as a viable career option. They're getting into CG. And so there's less and less of the people that even know how to make traditional anime. So it's a dying art form. Meanwhile, the rest of the world wants more and more of it. And so I was like, there's a problem here that I think we can solve with AI. Let's try and solve this problem. So that's really why, and also at the end of 2023, when I came to Japan, AI was still a very new thing. Most of these studios
Yeah.
we were meeting with, they had never even heard, like, they had maybe heard of Midjourney. It was like, we were showing them some of our early tech, and their minds were melting. Like, holy shit, we didn't even know this was possible. Like, what is this witchcraft? But more importantly, we saw an openness. Like, we saw curiosity. We didn't see like this immediate thing that we saw in the West, where they're like, "Fuck this! This is bad for art." They were
Yeah.
genuinely like, "We're open to this. We want to understand this. We want to see how this can be helpful for us." So
Which
that's
is interesting because you would think it's one of the most kind of traditionalist places in the world where they value tradition.
Yes.
and craft, and but then
Yeah.
being open to, okay, let's see, maybe we can
And
improve
here
the
lies
process,
the
or
enigma of Japan, actually. What that is, what Japan is. You see Japan, and they have kept tradition, hundreds of years of tradition. They've kept it alive as a sacred part of their culture and their society. Meanwhile, they've built this futuristic kind of thing on top of it that got frozen in the
yeah,
80s. But like they're very
yeah, right, yeah,
futurist, but they're also like, that's why when you go, if you ever go to Tokyo, you'll see this, like this ancient like temple that's been there for hundreds of years, built right next to some like very futuristic building that was built in the 80s. That was like some cyberpunk. It was very cyberpunk for its era. It was like Blade Runner, and
yeah,
that is Japan. Like they're very open-minded to futuristic things. It's like Nintendo is from here, like video games came from here.
yeah,
They were the pinnacle of technology in the 80s, and then
mm,
they did end up losing that, but they didn't lose the spirit of it. Like, they have always been very forward thinking when it comes to technology. They've been slow on it in recent decades, but very open minded to it, while also being careful to protect tradition and
yeah.
culture. Yeah.
So then, what is this witchcraft? Can we go in a little bit more detail? How kind of the tech that you guys are working on sort of meets with the tradition of doing actual frame by frame properly, and what are the potential issues or pain points
Yeah.
that it solves. Um, if you can just give us a breakdown, because I think, like, I've seen the presentation last year in Annecy, and I was like, man, this is, yes, makes perfect sense, and
Yeah.
I wanted to kind of expand on that, and have a proper conversation.
It's evolved a lot
And
since you've last seen it, actually.
yeah, I mean, it should, right, as it should.
Yeah.
So yeah, just give us a quick breakdown of how
Happy
it
to
works.
talk to you about it, like on a high level first, like before, and I actually want to show you some examples, but I want to explain to you our approach. So when we first came to Japan, we decided, all right, we're going to move the company to Japan. We had raised our seed
Yeah.
round, and we had a decision: do we base ourselves in Silicon Valley as all the other AI companies do, or do we move to Japan? We decided to move to Japan, and we didn't yet have a product, but we knew that we wanted to use AI to we wanted to make AI useful in a meaningful way for the 2D animation production pipeline. That's all we knew, but we didn't know how. And none of us really were like had much real deep understanding of traditional 2D animation. None of us had worked as
Hmm.
animators. And then we did actually, one of our early people that we hired, he actually was a traditional animator that worked in the anime industry for many years, that got burnt out and then became an AI researcher to try and figure out on his own how he could use AI. And so he's been an important part of our team since the beginning. But we spent the first year that we were in Japan, we embedded ourselves with inside the walls of anime studios. We got access, kind of
Perfect. Nice. Yeah.
unprecedented access to anime studios. They allowed me and my team to live in at these studios and ask questions about, like, observe the traditional pipeline. I wanted our entire team, all of our engineers, everybody, to become deeply familiar with the traditional pipeline and understand the traditional pipeline inside and out. I didn't want to show up to Japan with some alien piece of tech that technically makes animation. Like, this is
Sure.
now how
Yeah.
you have to do animation. I wanted to meet
Yeah.
them where they were. I wanted to build AI that kind of could seamlessly slot into their pre-existing creative workflows and their pre-existing processes through their pipeline. So that's what we did. We learned the baseline of how they do animation traditionally, and we looked to find ways to integrate into that pipeline traditionally. So we saw, okay, they hand draw each frame, they make the keyframes, they have, and
Hmm.
that's an iterative process where they start really rough and then they refine it, and maybe several people are part of this refinement cleanup process, and then it gets handed over to another team who draws the in-between frames, and then that gets
Yeah.
handed to another team who colors it, and then in parallel you have people doing the backgrounds. And so we saw that and we're like, well, let's build a tool for each one of these things, and that's what we did. We built a tool that dramatically speeds up the process of creating the keyframes, but we didn't replace drawing with the text prompt. we kept drawing as the fundamental part of the creative process. And we created our very first product, which is called Magic Pen. It's an AI drawing
Hmm.
assistant. It's a real-time drawing assistant. Uh, we realized that whether you are drawing the storyboards or you're drawing the animatic or you're drawing the rough layouts or you're drawing the character model sheets or you're drawing the concept art, the key commonality is you're drawing. Drawing is
Yeah.
the most fundamental uh, intuitive part of their creative workflow. And if you ask them to put down the pen and start and trade that for text prompting, they're not going to do it. So we needed to figure out a
Right.
way
Yeah.
to make a translation layer for AI and drawing. And so that became the fundamental foundation or thesis of our approach to integrating AI into the animation process for the last several years. And it still remains that way now, but it's kind of gone to many levels beyond, which uh, I want to show you guys first where we started and how studios are using AI right now in their production pipelines. Because now, fast forward to today, we have many of the top anime studios kind of quietly using our AI drawing assistant that's for keyframing and our in-betweening tool and our background tool in their actual productions. They're using it. And when I say quietly, it's because although the Japanese are friendly to using it, they still are a bit concerned about what the public perception might be if they were to find out that they're using it. So that's a whole nother podcast probably. But
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
yeah. Do you want me to share a couple examples so you can see them visually
Sure.
or?
Sure. Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whoa,
Okay. Here we go.
we got the infinite effect. um, Here we go. Can you see my
Okay.
screen?
Awesome. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So this is our very first thing that our kind of flagship tool that we went out to studios with that studios are using. It's a real time drawing assistant. Think auto tune
Yeah.
or auto spell or autocomplete for drawing. We the previous like the kind of legacy version of this tool we had to pre-train the characters in so that studios would show up with their model sheets like this
Hmm.
and then we would train the model sheets in so that it would understand exactly what the character's supposed to look like and then they would
Right.
start doing their rough sketch and then Magic Pen's looking at their rough sketch in real time and attempting to skip ahead, so it's like cleaning it up in real time, so taking you from the
Right.
layout to an actual clean genga or keyframe, and it's an iterative
Yeah.
process.
So basically, it's like for those who will be just listening to this and not watching, it's basically you just kind of rough out the shape of the character, and it kind of completes the design of the character based on the character sheet that had been previously
Yeah,
um,
but it's happening in real time.
uploaded.
So as
Yes.
you're drawing, every 2 seconds, you're getting a new cleaned up output. It's like looking at what you're drawing as an input and follows along
Hmm.
with as you're drawing. And then you can get to you at this point, you see that very quickly in this example, the animator got to a very good output perfectly on model quite quickly. They can then copy
Yeah.
that output and paste that back into their drawing software, into their canvas. This now becomes the new
Oh, cool.
input, right? So they can now erase and edit and make changes. They're iteratively working the way they
So
normally
you can
would.
iterate on it.
It
Yeah.
continues to follow along with you as you draw. So it's not done until you say it's done. Um, right? So, anyways,
Yeah.
this was the first version of it, and we had to train these models, and you put in, the rough sketch, and then it comes out something very clean. You'll see in this drawing here, even though this on the left, that rough sketch, you can tell it was drawn very quickly. It looks like a rough
Yeah.
sketch, but you can also tell that a professional drew it, right? Because
Yes, because you
the
can tell the position of, yeah, yeah,
perspective is right, the proportions and
perspective is, yeah.
anatomy is right. So you still need to show up with like an understanding of some of the fundamental principles of drawing, and definitely if this is in the context of animation, then you have to make, because this is just cleaning up one frame at a time, you still have to make decisions about the trajectory of motion as well. This is not a video model, it's printing the animation, it's just helping you refine each one of those keyframes. So because of that, this is actually the very first AI tool that's been officially adopted as part of the official curriculum at many of the top anime schools and animation schools across Japan. So this is being taught
Oh,
alongside.
wow.
Yeah, there's many of the top animation schools that are teaching this tool now in their classes. And we told the schools when we first started partnering with them last year, we said, you should not teach this tool to your first year students, and maybe not even your
Hmm.
second year students. Like, let them learn the traditional processes first, and then hand them this tool. And so
Yeah,
that's what.
because the quality of the inputs need to be at a certain level for this to be efficient and to work, right?
That's right. Yeah, because if you just go in and draw a stick figure, it's not gonna come out looking great, you know? Like, you need to, as you can see with all of these inputs, like, clearly the proportions are
Yeah.
right and well defined. The perspective is right and well defined, and then it can go ahead and say, "I understand what you want here," and it skips ahead. Um, it's actually worth mentioning, so here it is in the context of full animation, right? So the input,
Hmm.
this is what they call in Japan the layout. It's very
Yeah.
rough, but it's clearly defining the trajectory of motion. It's clearly
Yeah.
defining the animation. And actually, it was interesting for us to learn that the most talented and experienced animators in Japan, the only part of the process that they're drawing is this. They're doing only this. They're not doing
Hmm.
the really cleaned up stuff. It's because everything after this point, the layout is just a
It's
refinement cleanup.
technical.
It's just
Yeah.
a cleanup step. Yeah. It's just a bunch of like largely uncreative work where the animator is just like, because the layout is the blueprint for the animation. It informs the rest of the
Yes.
animation. And the step before this, that is the blueprint, is the storyboard. And the storyboards are always drawn by the director. So the director communicates their vision in a larger way through the storyboards, and then the storyboards get converted into layouts for each of the cuts by the most experienced animators, and then everything else after that is a cleanup step, and then the in-betweening now just gets outsourced to China. They're like human render farms. There's nothing creative about it
Hmm.
at all. They're just hand
Hmm.
drawing over and over and over the same thing, and half the time it's off
Yeah.
model. So what we look to do is preserve the important creative parts of this, which is the layout, and that remains human and remains hand drawn, and we preserve that in the process, and then we automate all of the kind of labor intensive, repetitive parts that
Yeah.
take up so much time, and it skip them ahead. So that was the thesis
So
behind Magic Pen.
yeah, you're not taking away any of the creativity in terms of or decision making in terms of the animation itself, right?
Yeah.
And the movement.
So this is V1 of Magic Pen. Um, Now we've evolved it to a new version of Magic Pen. We haven't like deprecated the old version, but the tech is evolving and it's evolving fast. So we don't need to train character models anymore. We just show the system an image of the reference. We say this is the model sheet and just look at it. We don't have to spend any
Hmm.
time training it in. It can just look at it and understand. And it can do full color if you want as well. We can go straight to full color. This was the input and this is the output. But the
Yeah.
most important consideration here is what I showed you before with the previous version of Magic Pen. You had to go in and input each frame one at a time and clean up each frame one frame at a time through an iterative process. But now you can actually input the entire animated sequence, the full cut, the full shot as a video into the model plus the character model sheet, and it gives you
Yeah.
back a full animated sequence. So it's video to video now.
Okay.
So we call this batch Magic Pen. This is the evolution of where this has gone, and this was a direct result. We developed this not just because we could and because the tech was going there, but because all of our customers they're like, "This is great. Can you make something even more automated for us?" They asked us for this. They asked us for
Yeah,
this, and then
because normally you would have that cleanup process, like you said, well, and then some like the in-betweening, and then there will be, like you mentioned, a team sitting down and coloring this in,
yeah,
and then doing backgrounds and so on, right? So,
that's
but
right.
again, like you still, as a as an animator, you still have full range
Yeah,
of of what you're doing. It's not limited. Just it's just kind of skipping ahead to the final render, as it were.
yeah,
So this
that's
is
right.
this is in a sense very similar to how Unreal shifted the paradigm in terms of um, the production pipelines and kind of render on the fly type of approach rather than for CGI for 3D rather than putting it in and then having to have a render farm or rent one and render out the shots.
Yeah.
And this is live. This is awesome. Okay.
Yeah. Um, and we noticed also a lot of studios in Japan and all elsewhere, they're doing their layouts through live action previs or 3D previs sometimes, or actually more they're starting to really increase the amount of 3D previs that they do. Um,
Hmm.
the main reason being that there's just a shortage of animators that can hand draw the layouts really well. So they're like, well,
Yeah.
there's a increasing number of like 3D animators coming out of school. So let's have them make the previs in 3D first, and then we'll have our cleanup artists go and just essentially rotoscope on top of that. So we designed our
Yeah.
system. You can input the hand drawn layout if you want, but you can input 3D previs if you want as well. But you can also input live action previs, because a lot of these studios, even going back to like Ghibli, has been doing live action previs for years. They'll film
Yeah.
something and then they retime the frames and then they're using it as loose guidance. So we also have the live action previs as well. And you can see we've actually
Oh wow.
retimed the live action frames here. This is not 24 FPS. I filmed this and
Hmm.
then retimed those frames to be variable speed like it would be timed in anime. And then it's just one for one restylizing.
Yeah.
Here's another example of live action previs. Um,
Oh, cool.
so this is where we really start to get into where I think all of this goes. And this is that
Yeah.
video models, I think, are the future of animation. I think video models are the future of 2D and 3D animation and live action and live action for VFX. The only real barrier has been fidelity and
Hmm.
controllability. So we've
Yes.
seen over the last year, especially the fidelity of video models dramatically increasing to the point now where we've got like models like Seed Dance 2.0, where really I think they're passing the Turing test. You can't even tell it's AI anymore. And this is the worst it's ever going to be. So the fidelity is there. However,
Yeah.
with that's the prerequisite. Without the controllability, it's just a slot machine. It is not
Yeah.
something that's actually practically usable in a commercial production. If
Yeah.
you have a real vision in your head, you're part of a team, you're a director, you're a studio. If you can't get the video model to make the exact thing you need it to make, then it's a useless tool for you. Maybe it's like a fun idea machine, but it's not a final
Hmm.
pixel. And so
Yeah.
that's really what we've been focused on as a second phase for our company,
Control.
is because we think that the video models are finally at a point where they're high fidelity enough and they're controllable enough, but they're not controllable enough out of the box. We have to train special layers of controllability on top of these models and
Hmm.
then more importantly, we need to build layers of application on top of these models that make them make sense for the production pipelines, for the way that
Yep.
studios like to work.
Yes.
We don't want to, and really most importantly, retaining that human control, which still is hand drawn. It's still the layouts and it's still the storyboards, and it's still the animatic, right?
Hmm.
Um, so, anyways, that's kind
Yeah.
of. There's a lot more I could show, but I know we're
Sure.
kind of running
Sure.
out of time, so there's a limit to what I can show here. Um, yeah,
Yeah. Awesome. This is really really fascinating. Um, Thank you for sharing that. And again, I'll reiterate. I I love the idea. First of all, I have to commend your positive outlook or your lingering intention to look at these developments from a positive through a positive lens.
mm,
And I think that is maybe lacking a little bit in this conversation.
yeah,
And I, it's irreversible, so we might as well
yeah. It's
do it.
it, it's scary. We're staring down the barrel of uncertainty, and it's scary. And I get it. Like I
Yeah,
completely understand it. And the best I can do is actively participate to develop this technology in a responsible way and frame it in a way where it is advantageous to creators and keeps humans in the loop, and it
yeah,
becomes um, it becomes actually a huge advantage, a huge advantage for them. Not something to be afraid of that it's going to replace them, but something that can empower them. And the last thing
yes,
I'll leave you with on this, as we were talking earlier in this conversation about democratization, like what does that actually look like? So animation has always required the collaboration of hundreds of people. And
Yeah.
most of those people are being overworked and underpaid. And the reason they do it is because they love it so much, and because they just want to be a part of it. And also because there's some glimmer of hope that maybe one day they can climb the ladder, and eventually they'll
Yeah.
get to that point where everybody wants to be. They want to be a director. Every single one
Yeah.
of them, every
And
animator
now
that
they
we've
can.
over the years, they're sitting there like a cog in the machine. They're a human render farm, and they're cleaning up for somebody else's vision, and they are quietly on this in their side time working on their own IP, and hoping that someday,
Yeah.
eventually, that Shueisha will come calling, or Kodansha or Katakawa, and say, "We want to greenlight your project, and now you're going to get your shot." But the truth is it almost hard. It basically never happens for anybody.
Sure.
And that's same
Sure.
for filmmaking. It's same for all of it. It's like every one of these mediums. Most people are doing it for the passion and the love, and for the hope that maybe someday they might be one of the lucky people that gets a green light from Netflix to make their project, but most of them will not. Now everybody gets their shot. Everybody gets their shot to tell their story. Not all of them will be
Yeah.
good, but we're going to get to
Yeah.
hear. There's a ton of really amazing stories that have been locked in people's heads that probably otherwise would never have seen the light of day, and now they're going to get their chance. So
Yeah.
everybody gets their shot. Maybe they're going to lose their job as an animator, but they're now going to get their opportunity, their real opportunity, to get the thing that they've always really wanted, which was to be a director. So
Yeah. I love
yeah.
that, and I think it tracks. And also, I think maybe what is missing a little bit from the conversation is when you're thinking about it in abstract terms in a vacuum, is like, yeah, oh my God, I will lose my livelihood, maybe. But if you actually look at the industry and where it does happen at an industrial scale, whether it's animation for content, whether it's hell, game production, AAA game production, it's brutal. It's a if you're a cog in the machine, it's always crunch time,
Yep.
and you're not valued. And there's so many examples for AAA and studios as well. You're hired for the gig, and you
Mhm.
have a gig for 6 months, for 2 years, whatever it is. Once that season is done, you're done,
Yep.
right? So, and you're in the gig economy anyway, and you're underpaid and overworked, and it's a tough place to be. And you kind of keep going on the steam of this kind of hope of making it, quote unquote, one day, or getting big, or getting a chance to tell your story. So again, in a vacuum, and if you abstract a little bit, you go, yeah, that's kind of hellish. But at the same time, reality, actually working in the industry, can be quite hellish, and it is for many of these functions.
Mhm.
So if you create this new avenue for people to tell their stories, and become storytellers in a more, you know cost effective or independent way,
Yeah.
maybe that's not all bad, you know?
No. Yeah. I mean, execution is one part of it, right? So there's a great analogy that I think Rick Rubin used.
Yeah.
You can give the same script to three different directors, and give them each a $50 million budget, and
Yeah.
you're going to get three very different
3
films.
different films. That's the way it
Two of
should be.
them, two
Yes.
of them might be steaming piles of garbage, and one of them might win Best Picture. It's the
Yeah.
same story. What was the difference? The same budget. You might have the same like high level executors on it. What was the difference? It was the human point of view. It was how the director wanted to tell that story. That's the important part. And the execution part was the money. It was the money that came in and allowed that director to execute on their vision. And so when people go to the movie theater, they don't stay to watch. Most people don't stay to watch the credits to find out who did the makeup and who did the costume design, and nobody gives a shit. Like the reality is, like people just care. Did I feel something? Did this thing make me feel something? And that thing they're connecting to is that human point of view, the original intention that was set out in the beginning
Yeah.
of the project by the kind of main creators of it. And not to say that there aren't creative decisions that are made in between. Like there are valid
Sure.
creative
Yeah.
decisions that are made, and it's accumulation of millions of creative decisions by lots of people that
Yeah.
are made that make up the film. But ultimately, the responsibility of if it connects with humans or not squarely lands on the shoulders of the director, and that's their role, right? And I just think that AI now, even though what it is, it's a fire hose of infinite possibilities, and it can just blast you with good and bad things, but it doesn't have the ability to understand itself what is good or bad. It still needs
Hmm.
the human to direct that fire hose towards good. So humans
Yeah.
remain, we remain the filter of taste, and the human point of view remains the most important thing, as it always has been. The execution becomes faster and easier and cheaper, but whether you're executing faster and cheaper towards something that's a steaming pile of shit, or you're executing faster and cheaper towards something that wins an Academy Award, still remains a very human thing. And AI, for the foreseeable future, in my opinion, will not be able to make those sorts of creative decisions to make things that are compelling and connect to people on a really human level like that. So that's my
Right.
final thing
Yeah.
to say about it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. So listen, thank you so much for this. I do have one final question that I end every conversation with. So I'm going to put you
Okay.
on the spot a little bit, but you just can just whatever comes to your mind. This community of people, I named it the Toon Room.
Yeah.
So imagine if you were asked to put a note on the door of the Toon Room for people basically, coming into this.
Mm.
Maybe it's people pivoting, careers like you did. Maybe it's young people wanting to work in animation in some shape or form, and they're just coming into this industry, this kind of junction. So if you had to pin a note on the door, like a welcome note, a piece of advice, a bit of sage advice, what would it be?
Um, don't stop learning. There's never been a more important time, I think, in human history to devote yourself to learning. No matter what age you are or what stage you are at in your life. I keep telling people when I run into somebody that's worried that they're going to lose their job, I tell them, you're not going to lose your job because of AI. Like AI is not likely going to take your job. A human that learned how to use AI is going to take your job for sure.
Yeah.
Um, learn. Um, be open to learning, and that's the best piece of advice I could give anyone in any
Awesome.
field right now.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, in any field, not just animation,
yeah,
right?
any field.
Yeah, yes. Thank you so much. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for this.
Thank you.
I really enjoyed it. Thank you for your time. Thanks for sharing your story, background, and what you're trying to do. And um, I think I think you're really approaching things in the correct way. So again, I commend you for that.
Thank you
And
so
for
much.
immersing yourself in the medium and immersing yourself in the environment to try and figure out how to solve the problems the right way and what are the problems in the first place. I think that's amazing. So
Thank you.
thanks
I really
again for
appreciate that. Mm.
thanks again for your time and best of luck, and we'll speak soon.
Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.